From the outside, they seem like a contradiction. Too quiet to be confident, too intense to be calm, too distant to be disinterested. You can't quite place them, and that's exactly the impression they leave behind. Strange, magnetic, and impossible to explain. You may have heard people call them complex or simply confusing. Today we name them INFJ, INFP, and INTJ according to the MBTI framework. But Carl Jung had a different word for them. He called them deep intuitives. If you've ever met one, you probably didn't know their type, but you felt the effect. A kind of psychic gravity, an intensity that pulled inward instead of projecting outward. Something about them lingered with you, long after the moment passed. Maybe they are still in your life now, a sibling, a quiet friend, or maybe it's you. Whether you've realized it or not, there's a reason these minds don't fit easily into the world. They don't just think differently, they perceive differently. Not just the surface, but what lives beneath it. The invisible, the symbolic, the unspoken structure behind behavior. Carl Jung once said, "The fact that many a man who goes his own way ends in ruin means nothing. He must obey the law that is in him." These types were never designed to mirror the world. They were built to mirror the unseen. They live from the inside out, constructing intricate internal systems that shape how they see, feel, and move through life. Stay with me. We're about to uncover the three biggest misconceptions about INFJ, INFP, and INTJ minds. Why the world misreads them, how their internal perception actually works, and what Carl Jung's depth psychology reveals about the truth beneath the surface. By the end, you won't just understand these types better. You'll understand why their difference was never a flaw. It was a design, a message, a pattern meant to be seen by those who can recognize it. Before we begin, let's ask the obvious question: why are these three types misunderstood so often? Most people assume these types are basically the same: deep, quiet, thoughtful. But this first mistake already sets the stage for everything else the world gets wrong. INFJs and INTJs may share introverted intuition, but they filter it through completely different systems. Feeling for the INFJ, thinking for the INTJ. INFPs, on the other hand, are led by a different force altogether. Introverted feeling, supported by extroverted intuition, which means their inner world is shaped by values, but constantly energized by ideas, connections, and unseen possibilities around them. Each one perceives from the inside out, but the internal compass they follow is tuned to a different signal. Jung wrote, "The function type determines how a person's consciousness is set to receive or act upon experience." In other words, each of us carries a built-in structure, an inner law of orientation that shapes how we understand the world. So before we name the three major misconceptions, we have to start here. They may all seem quiet or complex on the outside, but internally, they're building entirely different worlds. Let's begin with the first major misconception. Misconception 1. They overthink everything. You've heard it before. Maybe you've even said it to yourself. But what the world calls overthinking is often something else entirely: pattern recognition. INFJs aren't just replaying events in their mind. They're tracking emotional patterns across people and time, building a map of unseen dynamics, like a detective connecting subtle clues. INFPs aren't indecisive. They're aligning their choices with deeply held inner values, and they won't act until it feels true, like an artist waiting for the perfect shade. INTJs aren't spiraling. They're simulating the system, predicting 3 steps ahead to avoid chaos, much like a chess player always seeing the next move. What looks like hesitation is actually alignment, because none of these types act until their inner compass is ready. Their internal systems aren't chaotic. They're structured, precise, layered, and deeply consistent. Jung wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system. They don't rush the process because their system is already doing its work from within." That slowness the world criticizes, it's not a flaw, it's architecture. Misconception 2. They're too sensitive or too emotionally cold. This is where the contradiction turns painful. To some, they feel too much. To others, not enough. But this contradiction only exists if you don't understand how they process emotion. INFJs feel other people's needs first. They're wired to absorb emotional tension and suppress their own for harmony, like a sponge soaking up a spill. INFPs feel deeply but express carefully. If it's not fully authentic, they'll keep it inside, guarding their inner world like a sacred garden. INTJs often appear emotionless, not because they don't feel, but because emotion gets converted into strategy, not expression, like a complex algorithm processing data. Jung wrote, "Introverted feeling seldom appears on the surface. It is mostly silent, inaccessible, and not very communicative." These types aren't disconnected. They're private. Their emotional world is sacred, and when the world demands that they perform it, they withdraw to protect it. They feel what others refuse to admit, and they carry it in silence. Misconception 3. They think they're superior or special. This one cuts the deepest, because it misinterprets depth as ego and turns isolation into a personal flaw. But if you look closely, you'll see something very different. INFJs often feel alienated, not because they think they're better, but because they sense what's unspoken and can't unfeel it. They can't stop feeling what others refuse to feel. INFPs hold sacred values the performative world dismisses, so they stop explaining. INTJs carry visions of systems and futures no one else is preparing for, so they build alone, and it isolates them. Jung warned that this misperception often leads to isolation. Jung wrote, "The introvert is very apt to appear arrogant, disdainful, and domineering. Not because they are, but because their values move inward, away from the collective stage. What appears as superiority or arrogance is often self-protection. They've been misunderstood so many times they simply stopped offering their internal world for translation. They're not trying to be special. They're trying to survive in a world that flattens complexity and shames depth. A world that mistakes nuance as ego." So what do you do with all this? You don't need to defend yourself louder. You need to understand your own structure more clearly. You don't need to justify your rhythm. You need to trust it. There is real power in knowing how you're built and choosing to live in alignment with that design. Jung called this individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Not expression for validation, but inner clarity that shapes the way you move through the world. Carl Jung didn't teach people how to fit in. He taught them how to find the self beneath the mask. He said, "The world will ask you who you are. And if you don't know, the world will tell you." So if you've ever been told you're too much, too quiet, too complicated, pause. Their misunderstanding isn't the truth. You don't need to fight for clarity. You need to recognize it. Some minds aren't meant to blend in. They're built to see the pattern beneath the noise. And if that sounds familiar, it might be yours. If you liked this video, subscribe to catch the next ones. You can also explore the earlier ones already on the channel. See you soon. Take care and keep growing.